state representatives in Bennington. I served first as a member on the Community Policing Advisory Review Board in Bennington, which one of my successors is here, Jesse, who is in the audience, and I also serve as the Justice of the Peace. I'm actually in my second term now as JP in Bennington. And my anecdote, and I thought about this a little bit, is when I was younger, my mother and father were really involved with the Humane Society. So they would go and help out with animals that needed a new home or if there was a situation. I remember this one story because it cracked me up. Are you cracking up too, Max? was this house that they went to with an older woman, and there are 100 cats in this house. And it was just 2 of them that went to this house, and they started taking out cats. And for every cat they took out, my mother was like, I swear to God, that 5 more would show up. And I think that's the anecdote that I would compare to being on the board is you feel like you're solving one problem, and then you find out that there's actually more problems that spawn from you solving that problem, and then you got to take care of those problems. So I think that would be my anecdote. I thought about that very creatively for a reason, because this is a very creative, panel and organization that you guys are part of as part of the series here. So I'll leave you with that and take with it what you will.
Let's see. So I began in municipal government in the town of Weston, actually, as an assistant clerk, and I was asked to apply for the job when the woman who was doing it at the time wanted to retire. And she and I worked together at the post office, which was right next door to the town office. And so that was how I got sucked into the world of municipal government in Vermont. And I was an assistant there for a couple of years. And then Irene hit, and Weston and Londonderry both got pretty well pummeled in Irene. And as Londonderry was struggling with recovering, there was a lot of upheaval in their municipal government for, like how things were going. And I was living in Londonderry at the time, so somebody asked me to run for the town clerk position there, and shockingly I got elected. And I served as clerk there for 12 years, and 7 of those years I also simultaneously served in the legislature. Unfortunately, Bill and I didn't overlap there, but and while I was doing all of that, I also served on the town's park board and chaired that for about 10 years maybe. I served on the board of North Star Health, which is an FQHC that is associated with Mountain Valley and clinics in, let's see, Rockingham, Springfield, Ludlow, Chester, Charlestown, thank you. I don't do that anymore, and there were probably some other boards here and there along the way, several things through the legislature. And then one day I realized that I had said yes to too many things, and that the tenor of the way things were going in the world of government was something I didn't have the wherewithal to continue with. And so resigned from all of that, took a job with FEMA doing flood recovery in the state of Vermont, did that until I got doged, and after that I ended up at the Secretary of State's office, where I'm doing municipal assistance calls. And so when someone, either with a municipality or a member of the public, has a question about municipal governance or any other number of things, I'm usually the one answering the phone at this point and responding to emails. And I also help with some public records request work and some other general administrative stuff. But so my journey over the last 18 years or so has kind of taken me far and wide, but also kept me really close to home. And municipal government is sort of where my heart lies. So that's mine. So I'm Zoe Contreras-Curl. I
I live in Shaftesbury, where I currently serve as the chair of the select board. I sit also on the Community Center Development Committee, and prior to being on the select board, I was on the Planning Commission, and prior to that, and also simultaneously to that, I was also on the Development Review Board. An anecdote that I thought of that I think is just useful, I wish I had heard anecdotes like this prior to getting involved in local governance. So thanks to me, I speak too fast, I move too fast, I move faster than Vermont, bad. You must slow down here. And I was approached about sort of like this crossover sport problem. We had kind of some clash going on and how the cemeteries were being run and how people wanted the cemeteries run. We had a cemetery committee and a superintendent. And we were having sort of issues about the purview of each of those, the roles of those two groups, the committee and the individual who was the superintendent. And there were some disagreements amongst those groups about how certain things should be handled. And the select board was asked to consider this. And what we did is we considered the issue in executive session. We came out and I disbanded the cemetery committee. Very bad. Very bad. Did not understand. So this, the next day I heard all about it. And they were like, do you know about the story and history of the cemetery committee and all these things? And I was like, I sure don't. I promise. I was just trying to streamline things, also bad. And so these are sort of like, this started happening and I was like, oh my goodness, okay. So I took time to learn from various and talked to the town clerk in Shaftesbury and learned a little bit more about the role of the cemetery committee, the history of it, the chartering of it, all of the cemeteries that we have, some of which are run by the town itself and some of which are private. Just sort of getting into the depth. People were saying things to me like, you don't have any of your dead in the dirt here. I looked it up, and I actually do. Okay. 1780. So I just want to throw that out there. I'm in action. Which I didn't know at the time, but I bet I do. Because I'm of Mormon heritage, and they're really prolific. So I learned a lot more about what was sort of going on, and also the interpersonal issues. Before the next meeting of the select board, I was aware that people were going to come to us concerned about this, asking what to do, why we had made this decision. And so we were sort of discussing everything. And I was like, well, obviously we have to reband the cemetery committee. We're just gonna say sorry about it and undo what I did. What we did in a moment of hastiness, trying to make things more simple, and in doing so, disrespecting the heritage of the town, as well as the members of those committees who should have absolutely been but they don't meet that often, and they don't meet for the entire year. And so to me, I misinterpreted what that meant in terms of how important it was to them. I was like, oh, these people only meet 4 months out of the year, they only meet once a month, this sort of thing. I was like, it must not be, no, very important to them. And very important generally. So we discussed this and went to the next select board meeting, prepared. People came in with speeches, and as we opened the meeting, I said, I just want to open up this evening by letting everybody know that we made a mistake in disbanding the cemetery committee, and we made a mistake in doing so in executive session, because that's not in keeping with the transparency that Vermont is used to, and that we all expect from not only local but also federal governance. And it was sort of this moment, and one of the people who had a concern about this came up to the table and she said, wow, you really took the wind out of my sails. I was like, no, I know you're coming for me. And I was ready. And then I said, well, why didn't you tell me, why you're here and what this means to you? And she talked to me at length about sort of the various cemeteries, what they mean, talked about all the generations of people who are in the ground here, and what that means to people who are really attached to the idea of family, which as it turns out I am not. Which is totally okay. But just different. So this all happened, and then the next day I go to work. No, I didn't go to work the next day. I had something going on, and the next day I came in, and my coworker said, "Do you see this?" I said, "No." I'm on the front page of the Bennington Banner with the headline, "Select Board Chair Zoe Ponchos-Curl apologizes." There's a picture of me talking with my hands, and then it goes on to sort of discuss the issue pieces work. And that's a lot more work, takes a lot more time, but it's worth it because everybody who's involved in these things cares so much. Their hearts are in it, and the respect that we're showing towards our dead is important. And so this thing that to me was little is actually very big. And I think that's a lesson that extends throughout many aspects of my life in like considering big picture and the emotions of everyone involved in every scenario, which can be challenging, especially in the heat of the moment when you're trying to make something better and you're trying to think of the best way to do it, and you don't want to be disrespectful ever. It's not in your really like code, but sometimes it happens either way. And then you have to say I'm sorry. And I told a friend about it, my friend Joe, and he said, "Oh, it's always good to say I'm sorry." And I was like, "That's a good point, Joe." So.
That's great.
Okay, that's a tough one to follow. But what Zoe just said, I can definitely build upon. I was saying that when we don't win, we learn. And sometimes we learn harder than other times, and we just try to avoid making the same mistake again in the future.
Or make it a different way.
Yeah, there are many iterations of how you can mess up. And we walk a very fine gray line, trying to avoid all of them. My name is Andy. I am a serial volunteer. I bought my house in Londonderry in 2018 and quickly joined the Tri-Mountain Alliance. They are a gateway group. I should have known better. Every person on the Alliance is actually part of 3 other organizations at least. So being young, single, having no children, kind of made me a prime candidate and target for them. At the same time, when you do give to organizations, everyone thinks you're making this grand effort to make your community a better place. That was a byproduct. Honestly, I was just kind of lonely. And I figured there were a few different things we could do at night. One, get on the treadmill, that wasn't me. The others, go to the bar, also not me. So I was like, let's make some friends with other people that like to do the same things I do. And that was volunteering. So I started working with the Alliance in 2018. Shortly afterwards, I saw an ad on Community Forum for an admin for the Conservation Commission and the town of Londonderry. This was volunteering but getting paid. It was checking so many boxes for me. I was not very, Kelly knows, I was not very good at submitting my timesheets, so I didn't actually get paid as much as I could have. I ended up with a few issues during our budgeting because I was just glad to be there. I'm a realtor by day and my schedule is all over the place. And I thought it was really cool that I was like learning things about the community while I was serving. And that led to a position in 2023. I was nominated and accepted an elected position on the Londonderry Cemetery Commission. So now that's kind of my gateway position into public service. And I'm very much enjoying that. I also serve as a member of the board of directors for the Winhall Community Arts Center in Winhall. I am the chairperson of Snowshoe for Hope. It's our new iteration of to solve breast cancer. It benefits the Susan G. Komen organization. It's our 2nd year because we did Sundown, Walk for the Cure, Race for the Cure this year with Komen. I also am chairperson of the Vermont Association of Realtors Member Engagement Committee, because what's more fun than more committees? And I also have been past president of the South Central Vermont Board of Realtors. So I got to serve I got a buffet of servitude. And I'm just glad to be here and learn from everybody else so that maybe I can pick up some tips. So it's one less mistake I have to make.
It's a great story. Thank you all. Kelly and Andy, you all mentioned a good bit about how you got started, which is my next question. So maybe since we've already heard a little bit about you were lonely, you joined the Alliance, and it's better than going to the bar. Like great. What are you gonna do at 6 p.m. on this?
It's a little more productive than running up a tap.
was working in a role that I really didn't like professionally, and it wasn't suited with my, I'd only been in it for like a year and a half, and I was like, I must stop doing this. And I spent about 3 months unemployed, and during that time made a lot of friends in Shaftesbury. I live on Old Depot Road, which is like a really community-oriented street. I'm not actually from the region, although they do date back pretty far on the paternal side. But so I was sort of lonely. I moved here with my wife, and I ended up getting a role at a like residential solar company that's been around since 2007 in Bennington called Power Guru. And at first it was to help them manage like a lot of filing problems because the owner and founder had passed away. And in the wake of his passing, there was a lot of sort of administrative work that needed to be done. So I started doing that and started making more friends and really getting involved in community, meeting a lot of people through that. And then somebody drove up my driveway one day, and they said, "Hey, aren't you Zoe Congress girl? Like, I think we've had you one time in advance of this." And I said, "Yeah, I am Zoe. What's up?" And she said to me, "Well, you know, we've been talking about you, and it would be really great if you could submit a letter of interest for the Development Review Board, because I hear that you have a legal background." I never became a lawyer, but I did go to law school for a year. I was a paralegal at one point, and I also worked in business development at like a white shoe law firm in downtown Manhattan for a while. Bad fit, maybe everyone's good, but follow your heart. Maybe it loves M&A, you know, Exxon forever. So I was like, I guess I'll do that. And I came up in a family. My father was a general contractor, my mom was an architect, and my mom was very involved in city planning. She went to like every city meeting in Austin, Texas, and every time someone wanted to do major development, she just destroyed them because she knew the entire code front to back, and she would show up in her like Havaianas, flip-flops, and like just go after these guys. And sometimes we watch her on public access television. They would say something and she'd be like, actually, out of her mind, she'd be like, let's try to pick 71. Anyway, so when this was asked of me, I talked to my mom. She's like, oh yeah, you should definitely do that. It's the right thing to do. And I was like, okay. So and then I also thought it'd be a fun way to meet more people and to get involved in like my community in a deeper way. And also, I do read pretty well. So I joined the Development Review Board about 2 years into that. Somebody who was on the Planning Commission was elected to the Select Board, and I was purged again. And okay, can you submit a letter of interest to take this Planning Commission role? And I was like, well, what day does it meet? But okay. So I took that role on and held those two roles simultaneously. During that time period, Shaftesbury did an interesting thing with the remainder of its ARPA funds, which is totally legal. But at the time, it was kind of confusing how we were going to take this money that was about to maybe be clawed back by a new federal administration. And we managed to work with a team of you know. And I was like,
Is that an official role?
yes, she's also on the select board.
Okay.
But at the time she was not, and she was on the planning commission, and as somebody who's now on the select board, and as everybody in this room knows, there are often a lot of open seats on these boards, and committees and commissions, so you are often seeking people out. And so she was doing that, actively, discussing with the group, and then being like, I'm gonna go do it, because it's in her personality set to do that. And like when she was leaving the planning commission, I took her seat on it, and she was like, why don't you, submit a letter of interest to the city, to the select board, and discuss with the planning commission who would be a good fit for the role. So it just sort of snowballs. Yeah,
that's
in a very good way though.
That's something Meg loves to talk about is succession planning. So certainly if you're on the board or once you join the board,
You have to start looking.
yeah.
And like in March, we've got a couple seats coming up, and it's interesting to think about like, okay, if these two people don't want their seats, who might want them? We're already talking about it, thinking about it. I'm sure that in all sorts of groups, this conversation is going on. And that's really cool. That's part of like getting really involved in local community, and then trying to bring people back in who maybe were on the boards for a long time and got tired out. They don't want to do it right now, but it's been 14 years. So what if it's really fun now?
I was always told that you have to find your own group replacement. Like if you're gonna step out, you better
Yeah, you
better
better
start recruiting and have somebody
Yeah.
ready
Who
to
knows
step
your
in.
role better than you?
Yeah.
Well,
And but yeah, so that's sort of how that happened. And I'm also now a member of, what is it? I'm like a town delegate to the Bennington County Democratic Committee. Those are all the words there in the correct order. And that happened like 2 weeks ago. And we'll probably snowball in some other way. Which is very exciting, because as it turns out, just like my mom, I love where I live, and I love my neighbors, and I really am invested in Vermont, and I'm very excited to be here. And what better way to try to show that is to participate.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, part of my role is to help welcome new and returning Vermonters, and returning Vermonters generally know this, but especially for new ones, I often say, the best way to show Vermont that you're serious about being here is to volunteer for something, and then people will take you seriously, like, oh, you're gonna stick around, you're worth knowing, that sort of thing, for better or for
Oh
worse.
yeah, and then you're also not gonna get, flatlander rates on your plowing in the winter. So that sort of, when you're so it's not a second home, and you're like, no, only home. Well, probably only home we'll ever have. So that's
Yeah. That and getting a Vermont phone number is
I'm
helpful.
not doing that. I say now.
Yeah, I also don't have too many contacts.
Well, once you get a plow guy, you might need a Vermont phone.
Yeah.
Well, so Bill, actually, you got started while you were still in college.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, well, what I was going to mention was I think we were talking about how we kind of also got involved, or who brought us along. Do I remember hearing that as part of the question? For me, two people in Bennington, one of whom's unfortunately he's passed away, but his name, some of you may remember, Jim Byers, and then a friend of mine that lives in Old Bennington, Susan Gordon, and the two of them approached me about a new board that was being established in town, and they said that you're interested in criminal justice policy, and they recommended that I should apply for it. They said it'd be important to have a student voice on the board, and that kind of catapulted me into this whole realm of you raise your hand, and now you're going to be signed up for everything. So then I had to learn how to start saying no, and that's a hard thing because in part it's I was gonna say it's hard because no one likes to say no. I mean that's the bottom line. But I've learned to be really good at saying that in the legislature. But it's really about if your neighbors in your community are supporting you, you don't want to let them down, and that's part of the reason why it's so hard to say no. But then you realize that if you say yes to everything, it actually it's actually more hurtful to your neighbors to do that. So that's where I started changing my mindset with that. But yeah, so I got involved when I got on that board when I was 19. I was a freshman in college, and I stayed on there for 2 years. And then my term was ending right as I began to run for the legislature, and I didn't want to politicize a very sensitive topic which should not be politicized, and that is policing and review and oversight of how our department works and how that money and the procedures and policy, how all that gets played out. So I didn't want that to jeopardize the work of that committee, because it's a brand new committee, which, I'll get into a little bit later, brand new committee, and I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything with money in the waters with that.
Sometimes not acting is a way of showing your care and doing more by stepping back.
So many of you mentioned that you were asked to join something. And I know there's folks here in this room who are new or who are looking to be involved, and they've encountered some resistance to, when they raise their hands, they're not necessarily welcomed. So I wonder if you could speak to that, if you have any advice or suggestions.
Well, I'll just say real quick, not to, pull it back over here, but I'm a little jealous of Zoe. You were uncontested. I've never run an uncontested election. I don't know what that says about them or what it says about me, but I've never had an uncontested election. And my big thing that I tell people, and I remember I was doing a presentation for, I forget which organization it was, up in Montpelier, and the one thing I said was always add to the conversation. You may not think that your voice matters because other people will tell you it doesn't matter, they try pushing you out, but adding to the conversation doesn't hurt anyone. So don't let, and again, I'm talking about this, don't let the haters get to you. Just, you have to, that what's right in your heart and what you're doing matters. And you have to stick with that. It's hard. I mean, it's not easy. You definitely need to have a group, just even a couple people around you that can really motivate you. That for me made a huge difference when feeling like it wasn't, that I wasn't wanted to run.
Yeah, Andy, you have thought about that?
Yeah, as a serial volunteer, I have been through many organizations before. You've heard the list that I ran off today. It definitely, sometimes the vibe isn't right. You make a commitment, you stick with your commitment, but that's going to help you learn about yourself, and it'll also help you learn about the people you want to be involved with in the future. I've been on so many committees that are more productive than others, and sometimes these meetings are always scheduled for an hour, never an hour, ever. And when you leave and you're starving and whatever, it's so dark and you're like, how did it get this dark? And you feel like it's midnight and you're a zombie and you're driving home and everything's replaying in your head. And if you care about what you did and you surround yourself with the people who also want to be productive and collaborative, it's all worth it. That's actually question number 7, and I won't go too deep into that. But and then you do, like Will said, some of us know each other already, and the other people who show up and do care and do participate, you find each other everywhere. And one day I'm in Montpelier for realtor business, there's Will. And you find your tribe and you find your people and don't blatantly ignore feedback, as Zoe has told us.
Whenever we will come and encourage all feedback.
Yes.
When there's pitchforks in the front lawn, sometimes you just turn your head and you just say, that's not for me. And that's okay as long as you meet your commitments to people and just stay focused on the good.
I would just say keep showing up. Particularly in municipal government, it's all open, it's all available to members of the public, and it functions better when people show up. It functions better when you get feedback. It's really easy to find yourself feeling like you're operating in a bubble, and you think people aren't paying attention, and you're just chugging along. And sometimes it isn't until that other person walks into the room and is like, what are you doing? That you stop and think about, direction that you're heading in. So if you're getting resistance, just keep showing up. Keep showing up with a smile, keep showing up, saying that you want to be helpful, and, you find your places. It maybe the thing you end up doing isn't the thing you started out thinking you were going to do, but the more people know about how their government operates, the better the government operates.
Yes.
And I just can't encourage people enough to just, learn. And I'd say hold people accountable, but I actually, people who are involved in municipal government hold themselves highly accountable, and are always striving to do the best thing for their community. So I don't know that that's a particularly helpful way to say it, but just, like, keep showing up.
I'll second. Oh, sorry, you want to go first, Andy?
No, I agree with Zoe.
Oh, sorry.
Wow. What's my view like?
So, for me, I guess like an answer to that is like I definitely had some feelings about this sort of thing when I sort of started entering town government for a lot of reasons, or town municipal work. I don't look like many of my neighbors. I'm significantly younger than them. Maybe the way that I move through the world is different than the way that they move through the world. And, there are a lot of gay people in Vermont, but it still is very much a different vibe to be young and like openly and outwardly queer presenting. Definitely like changed the vibe sometimes. And so sort of like how I handled that, at first, whenever I was getting uncomfortable or there were vibes from somebody that made me feel a certain type of way, I sort of was like, you know what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna approach everything with good faith. We're gonna approach every single person with good faith. We're gonna assume that they mean the best, that their heart is good, and that we're just gonna take time with this one. And that if they get to know me and they see that I mean well, even if we disagree about things, but I really am trying my very best, and that there is no like dark agenda going on here, that we're all gonna be okay. And so that's to the same thing, continuing to show up and being like, all right, we're gonna get to know each other. Okay, something about me makes you feel a little weird, let's have lunch. Like, I promise you won't feel that way later, probably. And I think that's just about familiarity too, and getting to know new people and getting to know new perspectives. And I think that Vermont has a lot of perspectives, and there are also parts of it that are kind of wild. Like, this is like the whitest place on earth. Like there's all sorts of ways in which we walk into this state as others, and then we have to embrace each other and sort of take the time to get to know each other. And we might not like each other at the end of the day, but if I take them in good faith and they take me in good faith, we're gonna do just fine in a room when we're talking about whether or not that shed should go there. That's kind of how I feel about it. Things are not always political, and I think that when people think about the political, they're thinking about sort of hot topic federal life, like these sort of like, big single issue voter kind of things. We're really talking about that you're gonna ruin your neighbor's view if you do this, or, we're trying to make things better, but it really is with everybody in mind, and I do think in that way, while it is socially political, it is very different than other types of politics, and that's what makes municipal governance great, and that's why it's really easy to reach across the aisles, because what we share is so much stronger than what we don't. So, that's my thinking on that one.
You're here.
I want to vote for you for a second.
Yeah, good faith is my new thing. Last couple of years, good faith only.
That's pretty hard to object,
Yeah. Man, I'm trying.
Well, it looked like you had something else you wanted to add to that sort of.
Oh, no, I don't think I can top that. I'm trying to remember what I was actually trying to say now. So it clearly was not as important as it is that. So.
Well, if you think of it, but let's go on to this question about what's something that you've been really proud to be able to accomplish as part of your public or nonprofit service.
Can I go?
Yes,
I have one
please.
about it. So I joined the Cemetery Commission in 2023, and on Tuesday, Amanda Benton from Century Mapping is coming to do subterranean mapping of our cemeteries and then digitize our maps.
Oh, yeah.
You did, and it's a big, it's a big deal. It's expensive, but also it's what's interesting is I don't usually get to speak with other people who are closer to my age, so I'm really excited about that right now. But I was probably the youngest cemetery commissioner ever as a sub 40, not intending to. I kind of got recruited, so no one showed up at my house. I had to meet at the local pie store. And we kind of hid in the corner because they were organizing a mutiny of somebody's term ending. And I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll show up. This is cool. And it ended up, I was more passionate than I thought it was going to be about how antiquated our system was. I was like, this is great. You got maps. There's maps in the vault. There were 3 sets of maps floating around. And I was just like, there has to be a better way. I don't know what it is, but it's got to be better than this. Because twice a year we meet up, because you know we only do work 4 months out, you know our secrets now. So like, once in Thanksgiving when the cemeteries close for the year, and then once in the spring before they open, we get all maps in one room like this, and lay them out and make sure they match. Sometimes we need to edit our maps. So super excited after years of work. We have someone coming to map 3 of our cemeteries, and we actually got information from your group because there was concern if we could have that information on a public town platform, privacy concerns.
Of course.
And it turns out it's a public record unless somebody asks to be omitted. But it's also going to help people who are looking to purchase plots. I still hesitate to see young folk sometimes, and I guarantee they're on Zillow, they're looking online, and they're gonna be looking the same way when they're looking to buy cemetery plots. Get an idea of what's available, what's out there. They wanna see a visual for themselves. So I'm really excited that's gonna happen this week.
Unexpected.
Josh Perry did that, I guess.
Cool, big victory. I know, I asked, I might do that. It's like, how else do you celebrate when it's over? I'm like, let's get GNAT down here, and I'll send out a little press release too, get some good photos.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Kelly, what about you?
Oh, it's something to be proud of. Starting a hard time trying to come up with a thing.
Because there's so many.
I mean, well,
Yeah.
do you want Will to go? No, because
I'm gonna say that.
there were so many things over the years that happened, whether I was behind them or not. But one thing that has just materialized in Londonderry is that they have finished renovating the town office. And they took a 2-story building that only had 1 usable floor, and they made it 2 stories completely usable. And it's beautiful. And that effort started, I think, the 2nd year that I was town clerk, and was about 10 years between, the first conversations about, well, we could really renovate this basement space that is completely useless and covered in spider webs and kind of scary, into usable office space. And later this month, and I know I'm not there anymore, so it feels a little weird, claiming it is an accomplishment, but they're doing an open house on the new building. And, they had to put an elevator in, which is very exciting for just, general user-friendly and accessibility purposes. And the front door to that office building, and it's an old schoolhouse, and we love that it's an old schoolhouse, but it was a very heavy, nearly impossible to open door. And I was always afraid that it was just gonna kill somebody someday. That you couldn't open it, it closed too quickly, if you any little thing, and it was just gonna pummel someone. And the ramp into the building was terrible, and the ramp was going to a locked door that was never open, so if you needed it, it was just awful, right? And so the fact that in this renovation, they now have an ADA accessible ramp that leads to the front door of the building, that is a modern day door that will open for people, makes me feel really, really happy. And, even though a lot of the work wasn't work that I was doing, being there and being a part of the effort to make all that happen, knowing that it takes a decade from the time something is an idea and people acknowledge that it needs to be done to when, the last nail goes into the board is something that I think about all the time. That projects are long and slow and painful, and you just have to have people that stick with it all along the way. And so, even though I can't claim total victory on that, it's a thing that I look at with a lot of pride that's being finished.
Am I the only one that has to answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, the one thing that I think I'm proud of, at least from counts that are people that that people want to see better things happening and change happening.
How did you do that?
Well, by joining that board and showing that 7 people were dedicated to exploring this new committee that had just formed, which was the first time in Bennington, I think, that we had a new committee. I thought someone said 30, 40 years. So it had been a long absence of where, all the boards was pretty stagnant. And then, we have an issue come up around, how do we get community policing up and off the ground? How do we set up a system of framework to review policies and procedures? And, for me, I look back and I'm like, there's a lot that I'm not proud of, right? In that we didn't go as far as we wanted to, but at least we've set something up and contributed to that so that it can continue, and that people like Jesse, that people are on that board can hopefully then reform it and keep it going and see it change and grow it from what we were able to start as kind of a seed project and watch it grow. And that, to me, that makes me proud. It's kind of like, you plant a tree, so that, gosh, I'm going to butcher that phrase, but, just leaving something behind that other people can carry on.
You
That's
made me
important.
feel like a branch.
There, yeah. And then I would say, in the legislature, just one thing that I felt proud of, just thinking out loud, was one of the bills that I sponsored that eliminated the military pension tax on retirement income that our veterans have. That was a small win. That was a bipartisan thing that just, it really was one of those things that I felt like, I contributed. It had been a long process, years in the making, and that was one thing I walked away from session. I was like, I'm glad we got that taken care of, because every other state, has gotten it solved, and we're finally on board with the rest of the country. So it's one thing from the legislature I feel proud of.
Right, so like,
Okay. So I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, sort of that when because I guess all of this began about 4 years ago, almost like my participation in the town chess fair. When I came on board, there were a lot of things going on in our town hall, which is Cole Hall, which is a donated building given to the town by the Cole family, which is a beautiful building, and it's also very old and was retrofitted into offices. I live in a 200-year-old house, 202 actually. So I get it, like 100%. But we had a lot of things going on in this office, and we had a mold problem that was very significant. We had members of the, town governance, or like not even the offices, like the town clerk, et cetera, who were having a lot of problems. We were having electrical fires, like little ones, but like just little ones. But we're not having them. So I was hearing about all this just while I was on these other 2 boards, and I was only at Go Hall at that time, like once a week, right? But now all of a sudden these boards keep happening. Now they're like 2 times a week, and they're like 3 times a week. So I'm hearing from various members of the staff, like, hey, this happened yesterday. Hey, so and so had to go home. Their asthma is really, this just like is really starting to compile, just sort of in, the periphery of my life. And which is very busy in its own respect. So I'm like, oh man, this is really going on. These people are really suffering. It's too bad. So I come onto the Community Center Development Committee, and we're trying to figure out all these different things to do with this ARPA money. Building a building is crazy. It's so expensive. The site work alone would cost at least half of that $500,000, if not more, once you start getting into what you find under there, or oh no, it's lead. So I'm like, okay, well, we don't have $1.5 million. We're never going to have that, and there's no way to raise that, and also this shouldn't be a burden to the community. So this is the space that we're going to maybe build as new town offices that are also community center, right? So we're starting to talk about all of our different options. It's getting intense. We're going every week. We've got people coming from modular structure companies explaining us how modular structure. It's just endless. And we're trying to figure out what to do. And somebody from the community said, hey, what might be a good idea is there's a building for sale at 7A that has long housed the community doctor's offices. Dr. King worked there for many years, and prior to that, a series of family doctors for a very, very long time. This is a very important building to the community in terms of what it means. These people went here, their children went here. In the same way that Cole Hall means so much, people went to elementary school in that building. So, who serve in town offices right now, learning more about the importance of time. And so, I town offices into this building, create a community space in this 500 square foot room that's in the front, that's a smaller community space for the time being. And then we branch out and we start another committee, which I will not be chairing, that will begin to raise funds to renovate Cole Hall. Because the renovations on Cole Hall were also going to be like $1 million. Because it needs to be rate pointed. We have the same thing with the door. We have these scary steps. We have these scary steps. These people have not moved out of that building yet. And I have seen people slip on them. The downstairs entrance, also very scary. Just a thing where like, somebody would die. And like not even being hyperbolic, it's very dangerous. And I slipped on the stairs and I was like, I'm quite spry compared to, a lot of people entering this building, and I slipped on 2 of these steps. Like, this is actually really scary. And you get the quote for the elevator, it's $600,000 to start. And you're like, well, okay. So the idea was maybe, or is to move into this other structure and then start saving up money to renovate Cole Hall in the long-term future, or figure out another way to bring that space back into use because it's so important. But it never should have been retrofitted into offices. It didn't serve the purpose. It's just not right. Like, it doesn't work. So we came to the end of it, presented to the select board, and they said, all right, time to have a special town meeting. So I put together a PowerPoint, presented it to the Community Center Development Committee a couple of times. We workshopped it, presented it openly in an open meeting where people came in and gave feedback, and then we had the town meeting at the elementary school on like a Wednesday evening. And the room was full. Every seat was full, which I don't see that much here or anywhere. And so there was 100 plus people. I'm just sitting in the front, right in the middle, with my committee members, my peers on both sides. And I'm like, here we go. So I deliver this like hour-long, 30-minute long speech about this thing, and then we go to the floor vote. And I'm just like, oh man, this is very stressful, but we're doing so good and so well. And it was almost unanimous. There were two people who voted no. One of whom came up and voiced his concerns, which were that it was tax dollars. It's objectively not tax dollars. And there are a few aspects in which, because we are also taking some of the property taxes off of the rolls because of just the nature of how purchasing a building and making it a municipal structure works. And questions about what will this do to my bill? The answer is like very, very little. And so kind of fielding these questions, but it was almost unanimous now. I have heard, I am not, this is not my world, or I guess it is now, but that's almost never happens here. And the fact that we had 2 people come up and ask questions, and that they were in good faith, that we were able to deliver pretty realistic answers, that were able to, if not quell those concerns, direct them, address them directly, and not, waffle on anything. That was a big one. And so we purchased that building, we closed on the building, we're renovating the building. The only bid we got to renovate it, or like that we didn't really get, was way too high, so now we are GCing that project. Anyway, so that was a big one. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of my other committee members. That was a big haul, and we're not done yet. But we will be. Hopefully, the goal is Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and it is 88 decibel, it's all one floor, 2 88